violent.
Well, it's more intense. It's more intense for sure. It does look like the crowd has dissipated. Those who are there, though, seem to be bent on agitating. And I want to read a couple of tweets from St. Louis Police Department within the last few minutes. Destruction of public and private property continues in the Central West End neighborhood. We are doing everything we can to keep you safe. Tear gas. This is again from the St. Louis Police Department's Twitter page. Tear gas was deployed because agitators became violent toward officers and destroyed property at Kings Highway and Waterman. Officers have given 2 commands that this is an unlawful assembly, order to disperse.
And that's something we typically do see. There's usually 2 smoke bombs that go first, and we saw some of the gray or white smoke there in Eric Cox's live shot a few minutes ago. And then, our Vincent Blandon reported several blocks away feeling the brunt of that tear gas. As Eric explained, people are throwing bricks. You saw someone just there on the left throwing large bricks. That's what I saw.
The police line is advancing here. And we see Eric and photographer in retreat here, as they should be. And we see the protesters moving back as police now form a line even more forward than they were. And moments ago, we were focused at Westminster and Union. This is a little ways down the road. But we continue to see protesters in defiance of police orders. There is obviously right now quite a bit of space and distance between the police line and the line of protesters.
It's something Chief O'Toole did talk about earlier. He said there was the potential that protests could take a turn as night falls. And here you're seeing right here about 10:35 tonight that these protests are gaining a little bit of steam here. We're going to keep checking in with our crews. We have Eric there running, and we're seeing another couple of smoke bombs going off here on the left. Vinny, as we look at these pictures, can you give us an update on your location?
Yeah, I'm right here at Waterman Boulevard and Union Avenue. So let me give you a perspective where we were just in that last report. Sir, if you could please step away from us, please, please, please. As we were over here on Waterman Boulevard about Union Avenue. That was actually 1 block from the mayor's house. A person who lives on the street came back out. Now, about 30 seconds ago, we saw a lot of police officers in their SWAT gear. They were in unmarked cars, 4-door cars, trucks, SUVs, and they came out with their siren and lights running. I'm not sure if they were going to another emergency call or if they were just getting out of Dodge. But as you can see, I see a lot of foot traffic here from the protesters. A lot of them are running. But one thing I have noticed, the tear gas is no longer affecting our eyes where it had started affecting our eyes before. I can breathe a little bit better. People are now walking out without that. I can try to find out. Would you mind telling us what's going on down there? Because we keep it clean, though. Just kind of tell us what was going on down there.
Well, we were down over there. They're over there in riot gear. And from what it looks like, they started throwing smoke bombs at us, trying to get us to disperse, following tear gas.
And I know we had talked all day about this being a peaceful protest. The only thing, they were disrupting things. I was watching my clock when we heard the 3 shatters at the home that you guys believe the mayor lives. That was 9:47. Why did things go south at that point?
Honestly, I can't comment on that because at this point, it's alleged. I don't know anything about it. I wasn't present to watch it.
So it's alleged, but you see the house got a little small.
I did not personally see the house, no.
Okay, so down there, what's happening down there right now?
Right now, it looks like they've dispersed. I'm not really sure what is going on there. It looks like all of the protesters have dispersed.
Okay, the people here obviously say, okay, when will it end? When do you guys plan to stop?
When we get justice.
I mean, is that going to be like tomorrow morning? You got to go nonstop until tomorrow morning? Or is that?
As long as it takes. I mean, the fact of the matter is that a great injustice has been done. And time again, we've called for justice. We've called for peace. We've called for, reform. And every time we have been, we've been disregarded, Then we're just making noise, causing a ruckus, disrupting people. But it's our lives.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, sir. So as you just heard, that's a protest. And we've been watching him probably since about 6:45 this afternoon. So that's the reason I stopped. He's been pretty active. He's been pretty vocal. But as you just heard, we've not been down there since the tear gas. But he has said that the crowd is dispersing. There's no real end to this. They're going to go until they get justice. Now, what that means, we don't know. Back to you guys.
Confrontation Eric, when last we saw you and a photographer, you were retreating hastily and smartly. I understand you found a safe location to update us.
Absolutely, Steve. It has been absolutely. I don't have words right now. I'll be honest with you. I just saw a police officer get pelted with a brick. He fell to the ground out here, just a block from where we are. You can still see the fog in the air from the tear gas they just deployed out here to try to get these crowds to back up, disperse. They also utilized pepper spray. I saw several officers spraying that out here. Luckily, all of us, our crew, we are okay at this time. It appears that some of these other protesters, I don't see any serious injuries, nobody wallowing. It doesn't look like anybody really got hit with the pepper spray. But this scene is still very much active. These protesters haven't dispersed as of yet. And the police are still behind that shroud of smoke back there. I know for a fact they are because we've seen more activity from them back there. Again, bricks were being thrown their way. Arrests were made before that. This has really come to a head out here. I can't stress that enough. And so it's still just a very tense situation out here. We're going to stay out here and see what develops, what unfolds, and just how long this lasts. But again, just right now out here, we're going to do our best to stay safe.
Eric, give us a sense of how many protesters are there still facing off against police. What's the number?
Steve, that's very hard to say. They're being asked to disperse, and some of them are doing so. So they're breaking off by the seconds. I mean, what you can see right now on the camera, dozens in front of you, dozens right now. But then there's others on the next block and the block that way. They've kind of started to spread out. And the officers have grown in number as well. We saw them bring in more officers. You can see their flashlights heading towards us. So in order to quantify, to give you a sheer number, that's difficult. But I can tell you that there's over 100 on each side at this time. Still dozens of people out here, both protesters and police officers. That is what we're looking at right now.
Eric, you mentioned you saw a police officer hit with a brick and he fell to the ground. Did you see any kind of police response or reaction?
Yeah, that's when the pepper spray came out. That is when the tear gas started to be deployed at a more rapid rate. I mean, you could tell that pushed buttons. They were irate after that because it was one of their own, is what I'm imagining. Once one of them fell, once a brick actually hit a target, we started running. We had to start running because we knew the response was going to be significant, and that it was.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Eric. We do have some video we want to show you from earlier. First starting out with the protesters outside Mayor Crewson's house. Also there on both sides of the street, we understand there's a Jewish synagogue and on the other side a church that we don't understand the details of the arrangement, but they have allowed protesters or protesters have allowed themselves to be inside those buildings there on either side of the road. You see a lot of police officers, as Eric described. He described maybe about 100 of them from where we're seeing. They just keep coming and coming in a long line wearing riot gear and having shields there in front of them.
Benton Blandon said the escalation of hostilities began about, he said, 9:47 tonight. And they centered around Mayor Lyda Crewson's house. At that point, police tried to get protesters to disperse. Some of them did retreat and ran toward the church, the congregations. Again, this was shortly before 10 o'clock, and since then we've seen tear gas deployed on a couple of occasions. Eric Cox has said he has seen a brick strike an officer and knock him to the ground. Heavy police presence in the Central West End, and as Eric said, some of the protesters have pulled back. They moved to other blocks, so it's hard to tell how many protesters are still left in the Central West End at this point.
St. Louis police are tweeting about this. They did mention what Eric alluded to, an officer hit with a brick. Here's their tweet. Agitators are throwing bricks at officers at Kings Highway and Waterman. At least one officer right now is injured. They go on to say destruction of public and private property continues in the Central West End, doing everything we can to keep you safe. As officers, you see, are their information, trying to keep some sense of order, a sense of calm. That's not entirely happening right now.
Speaking of orderly and calm, I thought Lawrence O'Toole, the interim chief, was very calm and collected this afternoon, but he was also very realistic. He said it's an obvious fear for us that this situation will escalate. Tensions will rise after dark. Yeah. That's happened so far. You want to head back to the Central West End and check in with Benton Blandon. Benton, what's the latest from your standpoint?
Well, it appears now, Steve and Courtney, that all protesters in this area are no longer in this area. I just asked where they're going. They said we don't know, but they are away from this area. But I can tell you, if you can see down there, that's if I can go from memory, I believe that's going to be Lake Avenue, because right now we're at Union Avenue, Waterman Boulevard. I believe down there, the law enforcement is still gathered. There's a water fountain down there. The law enforcement is down there. They told us to not come down in that area. But again, I can tell you, all of the protesters have come out this way, and they say, hey, they're moving on to continue their cause. We don't know what that is, but people are now starting to go back in. We heard a couple of officers asking, hey, do you live here? And if Kenyon can see, there seems to be an officer in that white shirt right there where the cars are. It appears from that vantage point that they are talking to each person in the car. It's likely that they're checking IDs to make sure that the folks who are coming through this area indeed live down through here. But again, Leonida Cruz's home is one block over and kind of to the left a little bit. And as I'm not sure if you can see, but we can hear it. The helicopters are over there. I see a couple more. This is actually a media crew coming through. So basically, that's the gist of what's going on. No protesters are in this area anymore. The law enforcement appear to have staged the perimeter, and they appear to be checking IDs. Right now, we have 4 cars there waiting to get through in this area. So that's the latest, guys. Back to you.
All right, Eric Cox is standing by, also in the Central West End. And Eric, we understand there's a little bit of lull in the hostilities and at least calm for the moment.
Yeah, you could say that. For the past 10, 15 minutes or so, we haven't seen much action from either side, protesters or police. We're actually walking with a set of the protesters right now. I'd say there's still about 5, 6 dozen protesters on this portion of Waterman where I can visibly see them. Officers are still just right beyond this way. You can see their police lights. You can see several of their vehicles over yonder by where that Jewish synagogue and church sat, where protesters rested inside. They kept themselves trying to stay, I guess, essentially safe from the police. And what they're telling me, they're fearful for arrest, fearful for tear gas, fearful for pepper spray. But of course, police responding to reports of unpeaceful unrest. And that's why they're out here. So these two sides meeting, an unhappy ending so far, but of course, it's not over. As I mentioned, one officer pelted with a brick fell to the ground, a grown man. That is what we saw with our own eyes out here. We really aren't certain. We saw a few arrests as well. We don't know if there have been more since then. As you mentioned, it's a bit of a lull right now, but yet and still, people are on the streets out here.
Yeah.
In a community that's often quiet, but you know, I'm going to stay out here. I'm going to try and see if this will start to calm down anymore, and we'll eventually be heading home.
Okay.
Live in Central West End, Eric Cox, News 4.
Okay, thank you, Eric. We will check back with you. For right now, an update from St. Louis Police on the situation down there with a cop being hit with a brick. Here is what they're saying. An officer is being transported to a hospital for a serious injury sustained from a brick thrown at him at Kings Highway and Waterman. That situation obviously continuing with our Eric Cox there on the scene. We're working to get some video for you, more video from the scene showing some of the action that happened leading up to this. But again, that's a serious injury for an officer is probably not something they'll take lightly as they formulate their response in the coming hours and minutes. This is obviously something that police are trying to keep under control right now. If we want to go to that video that we're working on.
Well, we had it up for a moment. It was video of the mayor's house on, we were told, Westminster being vandalized. You see the vandals there, the vandalization there. We were told, it's not been confirmed, that a window or two were broken. Don't have confirmation of that. But this reportedly took place about 9:30, between 9:30 and 9:40. Venton and his crew were there as police ushered protesters off the property. And this really was the beginning of the escalation tonight. Protests had started in the Central West End about 6:30, 7 o'clock. At one point, they attempted to shut down Interstate 64. Police blocked them. They ended up heading back toward the Central West End. And at this point, right now, there's a lull, but not before a confrontation, which has resulted in an officer injury. And he is being transported to the hospital.
What you just saw there, we had to come off of it, but that was a live picture showing a line of police there in the center.
Okay, y'all. Shalom. Good morning. So glad you're here. I realize some of you have come on and you don't know exactly what's happening, let me just get you caught up. Back in 2011, there was a Black man by the name of Anthony Lamar Smith. He was shot 5 times to death by an officer, a white officer by the name of Jason Stockley. Just before he shot him, he said, "I'm going to kill this MFer." And when he was actually on a police chase with him. Anthony Lamar Smith slammed into a pole. He rammed his police car into him, got out, and shot him 5 times point blank. And this was just before he was caught on tape saying he was going to kill him. After he shot him, he went in the back of the car where he had a duffel bag, and he put a gun in there. Now, they're saying it was inconclusive and they couldn't tell whether he did or not. But here's the thing. Only the cops' fingerprints were on the gun. And they said even the screws, which means he took that gun apart and put it back together in order for his fingerprints to be on the screws. Okay, so this was a gun that he had, literally had, and he planted it on him, but none of Anthony Lamar Smith's fingerprints was on the gun. Yesterday, this cop was acquitted of everything. And if you thought the Mike Brown shooting was bad, this was far more brutal than even the Mike Brown shooting. That's what you're watching right now. I realize this was not as popular and out in the media like Mike Brown was, but just to let you know, that's what's going on. Sorry about that. My cat just came in the room, y'all. Sorry. So, because I know some of y'all are coming in the room and saying, well, what happened? What happened? I understand. Like I said, this didn't get as much publicity as Mike Brown. But when you see that video footage, it was way more brutal, the shooting. And one shot to his head, he actually put that gun in the window of the car, inside the car, and shot him point blank in the head. And this cop was found not guilty. That's why St. Louis is back up in an uproar. So this was outside of Ferguson. Okay, so this is in the actual city of St. Louis, Missouri, where this happened. And when this cop was put on trial, there was no jury, by the way. It was just a judge, a white judge. And this judge that was in charge of the case had a track record of letting cops go. That's why they got this one particular judge to preside over this case, because they said he's got a terrible track record of always letting cops go. So I hope that gets you all caught up on what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and start the video again so that, we can listen to the rest of this newscast. Oh, and by the way, one more thing before I go. I am working on a few people's credit reports. And again, if any of you are interested in credit repair, I have some really good news for one person that I did. I was able to get their bankruptcy off in 60 days. So now they only have one negative item that the Bureau did not take off, but I should be able to get that off in about 30 days. But I just want you to know, this was a person that just put a bankruptcy on back in July, and this is September, and I was able to get it completely off of their report. So again, if you are interested, reach out to me. And then I can get started on yours if you need that type of help. So I am making progress with other people that I'm working on. And some of you, I just made moderators that you might notice. I forgot for this particular channel, I didn't make hardly anybody a moderator. So some of you should notice that you are a moderator now. But let's get back to this story. I'm going to start the live stream again. All right.
Central West End neighborhood. That picture was coming to us from an affiliate, and so we just didn't have control over it. We lost it. But here's another look at just the scope, the magnitude right now live in the Central West End. How many police are there on the scene? You can see quite a few officers lined up trying to hold that area and keep protesters out, trying to reset, trying to regain a sense of calm, a sense of security there as they try to secure the scene around Mayor Cruzen's house. We can imagine she's probably not inside, probably not a secure situation for her to be in, as protesters were there earlier throwing bricks, one officer being hit with one of those bricks.
We see a line of protesters here still there. Some were backing up momentarily, but we haven't seen the numbers that we saw earlier. Eric described the scene where protesters have dispersed. Some are still in front of the police line. Others have gone to other blocks in the Central West End. The hope at this point is that the worst is over for tonight and that the rest of the protesters, whatever goes on tonight, will remain peaceful. It has not been peaceful in the last hour, certainly. And we saw that with the officer being injured and now transported to the hospital. Now police are advancing. The police line advancing. We just saw a protester throw an object at the police line and the protesters in retreat as the police officers come up the street. Again, this is the Eric Cox crew getting a live shot of this confrontation. Another smoke bomb, it looks like, being deployed.
We are still
Eric is saying that's tear gas. Eric, that's tear gas being deployed at this point?
Absolutely it is. Right now our cameras are directly on it. We're still in the line of breathing it in. We are trying to get out of the way to a safe distance. It's very difficult to do because, of course, as we continue to move back, police are moving forward. The protesters aren't dispersing. As a matter of fact, one of them just said it's going to be a very long night because they intend on continuing this game. Okay, we're going to continue moving.
Yeah, Eric, move out of that area if you need to, and
we are. I was coming back for Noah. He doesn't have as well of a line of sight with the camera. Looks like they're deploying more. We can hear it. And now protesters are throwing firecrackers back. That's right by him. Oh my goodness, that one was mere inches from us. I can't even describe for you what it's like out here right now.
Well, it
feels like a war zone.
You're doing the best job you possibly can under a very, very difficult situation. We want you to remain safe, but as we're listening along with our viewers at home watching as you set the stage. Feel free to talk, or if you need to send it back to us, do that as well.
Well, right now, several people are having their phones out. They're documenting this moment as well. I can't tell you just how tense it is. Again, I mean, like you said, there was a lull for a good 20 minutes. Then things came and ramped up. We saw more smoke. We saw more tear gas. Officers started proceeding forward. Protesters started running back. Of course, we ran with them. So far, we haven't been affected by the tear gas, but we're coming dangerously close. I can't say that enough. I mean, I don't know how long this is going to last, but again, some of these protesters say they could be out here all night. They're burning an American flag as we speak. It's really just this very surreal scene right now. It's almost out of a movie because you just don't believe what's happening and you don't know what's going to happen next. Protesters are running again, and of course we're running with them. They got flashbangs. Looks like they got flashbangs now. That's what I'm hearing. They're stepping it up, going to different methods. Now we're on a very busy street. I believe this is Euclid we just hit. So now we're intermixing with the night crowd. I mean, we're on Euclid amidst dozens of cars.
Eric, we'll take it for a moment for let you catch your breath. We We want you to be safe. We want you and Noah to be safe. In the meantime, we can tell you, we can pass along. We're going to continue monitoring the situation with our video, but we can tell you that the St. Louis Police Department is tweeting that a second officer is being transported to a hospital for an injury sustained from a thrown brick. They say they'll have more info to.
Yes, Petty Mentee, shalom, good morning to you. What's happening is in St. Louis, a white cop killed a black man back in 2011, and he was found not guilty yesterday. And if you ever get a chance, go out and look at the shooting on tape. It was pretty brutal. He shot him point blank 5 times. And he also planted a gun on him. And the judge overlooked all of that. They claim it was inconclusive that he planted the gun. But the gun that they found only had the cop's fingerprint on it. It did not have Anthony Lamar Smith's fingerprints on the gun at all. In fact, they said even the gun screws had the cop's fingerprints, which means he broke that gun down and put it back together. But he was found not guilty by a judge in St. Louis that's notorious for letting cops go. And there was no jury. It was only the judge presiding over this case. Okay, so there was no jury involved at all. And in fact, the cop acted all aggravated that he had to testify in court. Like, you know, how dare you make me come and testify over this nigger? You know, that kind of attitude. But he got off scot clean, and it's really sad. And, you know, and of course the people are angry because they saw the videotape. He shot him with a high-powered gun, and he even reached his hand inside the car to shoot him in the forehead point blank. If you thought Mike Brown was brutal, this was far worse than Mike Brown. That's why they're out there protesting. And I understand, Petty Mentee, that you might not have known about this because it was not really publicized, nationwide like Mike Brown was. It was pretty much something that was on local news in St. Louis. So not too many people heard about this outside of St. Louis until now. So I hope that catches you up. And I mean, I understand. And by the way, shalom and hello to you, Just Glowing. I did see you come in. Good morning to you. I'm going to go ahead and turn the live stream back on.
Comes to 2 officers in the last half hour hit by bricks and transported to hospital.
And now this, in the last 2 minutes from Governor Eric Greitens tweeting, reports of bricks thrown at police, that's not protest, that's a crime. We stand behind our officers. This violence won't be tolerated. The governor having spoken in the past week, for weeks now, in anticipation of this verdict announcement, saying he would bring in the National Guard. Protests would not be allowed to spiral out of control into the kind of violence we're seeing right now. It'll be interesting to see what he means by that tweet, but clearly promising there will be action in response to this.
And we were told by Matt Chesney that this afternoon the governor was touring the St. Louis area, the city and surrounding areas, to take in the temperature of the protest. Of course, that will figure in whether or not the National Guard at some point is deployed. We haven't seen that tonight. But we certainly have seen an escalation of protests. Largely peaceful. Those are the words of the mayor and the interim chief this afternoon about the day's protests tonight. Nothing peaceful about this. A couple of officers have been injured in the last half hour and transported to the hospital. The scene moving up and down the central West End. It's a fluid situation. Our reporters doing a fantastic job of setting the scene at the same time, trying to stay safe. That's the most important thing.
Right, absolutely. And we want to go to our Vinton Blandon, who is several blocks away from Eric Cox's location. Vinny, what's the scene there?
I have moved farther in. I'm now in the middle of Boardman Boulevard, and right here we have an officer here. He's and part of the command staff. He's not sure exactly what's going on down there on Lake Avenue because that is where Carolina Cruzen lives. But he did tell us that pretty much all the protesters have gone from this area. They've been wiped out from this area. Not sure what they're doing, but there is a line of law enforcement down there protecting the area. No one can walk down there. No one can go past in the other direction. Basically, no one can go anywhere near the mayor's home. Now, he's not sure exactly what's going on down there, but he did say they are investigating. They're looking at the house, checking things out, trying to get in touch with her, and making sure that no one gets into this area who does not belong. So what that means is he doesn't know it yet. There is a car right here. What the officer is doing, he's going to go over there, talk to the people, ask them to prove that they live there, kind of explain what's going on. If they do not live in this area, they are going to turn around and go somewhere else. Now, the heavy presence of helicopters is no longer the case. We have one that's circling around and it's using a spotlight. So that appears to just be, keeping a perimeter around. But we do have some folks coming down from this area. So this may be the people who live in this area. I did ask a couple of people. They said, their windows were open. They were on their porches. They smelled the tear gas. They felt the burning. So it did travel a good distance. This actual location is probably a block, maybe a block and a half away from the mayor's home. The homeowner did come out and confirm that information for me. We were not as far away as we thought. But that is the very latest here. Police are checking IDs to make sure people who need to get in here are in and people who need to get out, stay out. Back to you.
All right, Venton, we'll check back with you in a moment. Meanwhile, I want to show you a couple pieces of video here. Police vehicles, riot vehicles, as they're sometimes referred to, moving into the area in the Central West End. We also have video of tear gas being deployed. And I can tell you this, a tweet from the mayor, Mayor Lyda Krewson's Twitter page, verified Twitter page, reads, officers injured on the way to the hospital. That violence is unacceptable. That's tonight from the mayor of the city of St. Louis. As you see, tear gas being deployed on the streets of the Central West End and protesters in retreat.
Yeah, and we don't want to get too many steps ahead of ourselves here. But again, we're seeing the type of violence that could grow beyond the scope of what local police are capable of handling. That's why the National Guard is standing by. Our Matt Cesny has been tracking their movements. And he just gave us this update. He says that the governor is still in St. Louis. He has mobilized portions of the National Guard. We saw some of them standing outside a firehouse in Midtown just a few minutes ago. So the National Guard is here. They are standing back. Are watching how things are advancing, and they're watching how local police are handling the situations. Right now, they are not actively becoming a part of the response, but they are there in a sort of backup capacity should St. Louis police say, we need the help, this is getting out of control. Again, 2 officers we know of right now have been transported to the hospital after being hit by bricks that protesters have thrown at them in the Central West End near Lyda Krewson's home. So that's the scene, that's what they're dealing with. And as the night continues, we may even see more officers injured and going to local hospitals.
Governor Grimes has been active on social media, particularly on Twitter, throughout the evening. Among his tweets, he writes, "We will protect people's constitutional rights, but violence will not be tolerated." And he wrote that reports of bricks thrown at police, he says that's not protest, that's a crime. We stand behind our officers. The violence will not be tolerated. This all seemed to escalate at about 9:30. You're seeing spectacular video here we have when the protesters were more abundant in the streets of the Central West End, but the confrontation seemed to escalate somewhere about 9:30 to 9:45, and we have seen several clashes, skirmishes. We've seen tear gas being deployed. Eric Cox has done a spectacular job, as has Benton Blandon, but Eric has been right in the thick of it and experiencing it firsthand and done a great job while maintaining safety for himself and our photographer, Noah Brooks.
Yeah, it's hard to sort of get a sense of just a sense of what's going on when there's so much chaos happening. Our reporters are there in a capacity as the media, but quite honestly, they're a part of this crowd, this group that's organically moving from location to location. There you see a riot truck, riot response sort of vehicle that St. Louis police will use in situations like this. That was moments ago. This is not a live picture you're looking at. This is video that we gathered It looks like the crowd is pretty sizable in that area. I know people have moved from place to place as police keep pushing them back with the tear gas. But that looks like a pretty big group, Steve. I don't know that that's going to be so easy for police to contain to just one spot.
Well, the other issue that our reporters and other reporters covering this have is also interaction and occasionally animosity with protesters. We saw it with a colleague of ours in the St. Louis media earlier this afternoon, confrontation.
Yeah.
And, you know, Venton and Eric are in the middle of it. Right. And you want to be safe, you want to be secure. You want to ask what's going on, but you also want to be vigilant. You want to be aware and make sure that you're not going to become a victim at the same time. So it's a very difficult situation. We saw it 3 years ago in Ferguson, night after night. Our reporters are doing the best job they possibly can, but it's very difficult circumstances out there. And let me say this, very difficult circumstances for police officers as well.
We want to go now to our Lauren Posen. She had been in Forest Park. As the balloon glow festivities were underway. Lauren, a very different scene you're standing in right now.
That's right. We're in the Central West End now, kind of on the fringe of it. I'm going to show you over here. This is Washington. You can see police have the street blocked off. We just got here about 5 minutes ago, and you can still smell, and my eyes are burning from the tear gas that was deployed earlier today. Not a lot of people over here. As I said, police, as you can see here, this officer is telling these people to move back. I was told you can go east or west. They are taking things very seriously here. They're talking to officers. Again, you can see now the camera is pointing down the street, and you can see that road is also blocked off too by that gas station. Police here are telling everyone to stay off the road here as they handle the situation. A lot of officers here. We see officers over there, here, everywhere. And again, there's this crowd over here. So we're going to send it back to you in the studio right now. We're continuing to monitor things out here. Reporting live in the Central West End. Lauren Posen, News 4.
Lauren, thank you. You mentioned the balloon glow, and so many events preemptively were canceled, postponed, I should say, postponed to a later date, including Peace Fest, which was to be held at Harris Stowe University this weekend.
Another big
until
event.
October 16th. The balloon glow did go forward, is going forward this weekend. We're glad nothing happened at Forest Park tonight.
Absolutely.
We trust that'll be the case this weekend.
That event ended just in time, but another one to think about if you're talking about events this weekend is the U2 concert. That's tomorrow downtown. So no word yet on, we really don't know what's going to happen with these protests. It could be that it doesn't extend beyond tonight. So the organizers of that event have so far not canceled it. The U2 concert so far still going on,
But what's important to note is that there are as many as 40,000 people expected for that concert. So an influx of 40,000 people into downtown, that has to be taken into consideration. I'm sure how the rest of the night plays out will affect the decision whether or not that concert goes on tomorrow. Venton Blandon has been covering some of the events in the Central West End. We're going to go back to him for the latest from his standpoint. Venton?
Steve, we are still down in the general area. Every time you come to it, it seems that we move a few hundred feet closer. So once again, I'm on Boardman Place, getting a little bit closer. We're basically inching closer to Lake Avenue. This is the neighborhood, the community around here. A lot of Christians home now. As I showed you a short while ago, this is where one of the police officers were. They were checking the IDs. It's Commander Haynes, I believe he's in charge of the North Precinct. He said that he was here keeping people out. Well, he has since taken his car farther down, and he told us stay in this area, but it seems clear, so we're going to try to inch our way closer. But many more people have gotten in their cars and pulled out. This area is quiet. Just in our last report, it was quite noisy, just a lot of people talking, commotion, police presence. It's really quiet now. You hear traffic. You hear normal things that you would hear this time of night. You hear people getting out of their cars. The doors are slamming, people looking out the houses, closing the doors, things like that. So it appears to be normal, but I know I want to be cautious and judicious when I use the word normal, because certainly what happened tonight is not something that the people who live in this community are used to seeing. But again, as for what's happening down on Lake Avenue where the mayor lives, the police are lined up with the riot gear, according to the commander who was here checking IDs. He said that there are lines of law enforcement keeping people off this street from going toward her house, and then that are on Lake Avenue going away from her house. They basically don't want anyone in this area. And the officer did say that they're going to continue checking for a couple of hours people coming into this neighborhood. I don't see that happening here, but I'm unsure if it has moved the checkpoint to another location. But that is the very latest here. Back to you guys.
All right, Vinny, we do have some new video just coming in from earlier a few moments ago. Police just trying as best they can to push protesters back away from the area where they want them to remain out of. Seeing police there, one of them with a long gun, all of them in riot gear.
I can't take my eyes off the cloud of smoke. I don't know if it's a common. Look, we're operating here from the cheap seats here. We assume some of that is tear gas, some of that might just be smoke bombs deployed. I don't know. I don't have any of that information, but clearly, police have felt the need to deploy some of those items, and you see all that smoke drifting in one direction. The Central West End will tell you that this is no longer. These peaceful protests took an ugly turn tonight about 9:30, 9:45, and continued for about 45 minutes. We have not seen an escalation in recent minutes and recent coverage, and we are thankful about that. But I think police are vigilant tonight to think that this could go on for a while.
And also the governor, we're sure, as he has promised, there will be action, early action to keep protests from escalating too far. There you see police advancing forward as protesters are moving back, but it's almost as if every time they deploy more tear gas, every time they move forward, the protesters move back, but there's a little bit of an ebb and flow. As police push protesters out of one area, they'll go hunker down somewhere else. There was a group of protesters that were hunkered down inside a synagogue, a Jewish center. It seems that they had permission to be there, so protesters seem to just be waiting it out, and then they'll come back out. You'll see them make another appearance.
Doug, are we being told this is a live video of CNN? This is CNN feed right now? Yeah, this is a CNN feed, live video from street level. And there is an approaching line of police officers to protesters. Most are backing up. So the confrontations between the protesters, the lines of confrontation, continue in Central West End.
This looks like Kings Highway.
It is Kings Highway. This is Straub's. You see the Straub's
just
sign right
beyond
there.
the Chase Park Plaza.
Yes.
You know, it's a different.
Just north of the Chase. Yes.
Correct. It's a different scene. You're seeing this happen in an area that is a little bit more upscale. It's a little bit more suburban for the city of St. Louis. It's still in the metro area, but it's a area that has a lot of businesses. The Chase Park Plaza being a very upscale hotel. And this is not a scene that you would ever see happen in any area of St. Louis, let alone in an area like the Central West End, right in front of some high-end properties there.
At this point, though, nothing being deployed. It's an advancing line of police, as you can see, protesters backing up, as those appear to be Kings Highway. And as we said, this is a live feed right now from CNN. We have reporters Eric Cox, Benton Blandon, and now Lauren Posen, all reporting from the different various locations in the Central West End. The Jason Stockley verdict was delivered this morning shortly before 9 o'clock. Most of the protests throughout the afternoon in downtown St. Louis were peaceful. There were some exceptions. As of late this afternoon, there were 13 arrests made. There were 4 officers hurt as of late this afternoon, 1 only needing treatment. But tonight, we have seen 2 officers being taken to the hospital. We didn't actually see it. We saw 1. Eric saw 1, Eric Cox. But we were told by St. Louis police that 2 officers have been transported to the hospital after being struck with bricks. They report that at least 1 sustained serious injuries in an altercation with protesters.
The question now is, where do we go from here? I mean, you've got a lot of police on the ground. You've got a lot of protesters. The protesters have now dispersed. It's harder to control them as a singular group. They are everywhere. It's not just around Mayor Kreutz's home. It's now throughout the Central West End neighborhood. So police certainly trying to get a handle on this, but we have yet to see how that will happen.
You see the advancing line of police officers right there. The National Guard has been told to stand by and be ready. The governor has made that clear for several weeks now. We have seen no deployment of the National Guard tonight or today. But we have seen a couple officers within the last hour injured and transported to the hospital.
And again, the governor is reacting. We did see some earlier reactions from Governor Eric Greitens just before, and here is how he is reacting now. And we can just get a look at what's here. We want to toss to our Matt Cesny right now with an update. Matt.
Yeah, Courtney, we of course spoke to the governor about 9 o'clock tonight, but since then, as you can see and as we've witnessed here on News 4, there have been new developments in the demonstrating going on in the Central West End. Obviously, the governor is giving all his attention to this, and he went to Twitter just a short time ago to state this on Twitter: reports of bricks thrown at police, that's not protest, that's a crime. We stand behind our officers. This violence won't be tolerated. Obviously, the patience of the governor is being tested here tonight. He has been traveling around the city all day, visiting with law enforcement, encouraging them, congratulating them, and telling them they're doing a fantastic job out there. As I mentioned, I spoke to him at about 9 o'clock tonight, and this is what he said about the situation in the city of St. Louis tonight. Take a listen.
The local authorities are still and are currently in charge. Our job as a state is to support them, and we've been supporting them with the Department of Public Safety, the Missouri State Highway Patrol. We've also been coordinating with federal authorities and federal law enforcement, and our National Guard are currently, many of them are in a standby capacity. Others are engaged in helping to protect critical infrastructure, helping to protect our firehouses as we head into the night.
So at this point, the state is still in a position of supporting the city police right now in law enforcement in the city, things such as the Highway Patrol protecting the interstates and the National Guard, as he mentioned, protecting certain properties in the city, especially those firehouses around the city. Now, I did ask the governor if and when he might increase the mobilization of the National Guard in St. Louis. He really didn't have an answer for that. He said he's going to continue to monitor the situation throughout the evening and into the weekend, but that is certainly an option that he continues to hold as we get into the weekend here, where he could fully mobilize the National Guard and then move them about the city any way he sees fit at this point, or at least how they would work in cooperation with law enforcement. But so far, we haven't seen that increased presence of the National Guard except just at those firehouses. Reporting live in the newsroom, Matt Cesny, back to you guys in the studio.
Matt, before we let you go, you read my mind about when we might see what might trigger deployment of the National Guard. Did you get any sense of how many National Guardsmen and numbers that are in the area on standby?
We're not, because a lot of what's going on, it really hasn't been made public as to where they are mobilizing. There are several places within the metropolitan area that they conceivably could mobilize at. Now, we did see a number of National Guardsmen up in North St. Louis mobilizing at the St. Louis Fire Department Academy, but it certainly wasn't a sizable number. We had seen earlier in the day down in Jefferson Barracks, that's certainly a much bigger property and would likely be an easier place to mobilize and gather people, plus the access to the interstate I-55 North could get them quickly into the city. But right now, we don't have any exact figures as to how many guardsmen may be on standby at this point, but we do know that they've had a couple of days to do that, and they certainly probably are ready at this point, I would imagine, especially with the governor here and kind of overseeing things very closely as he is.
Very interesting. Okay, thank you, Matt. We appreciate the update there. An update from St. Louis Police now. They're saying a total of 3 officers have been injured within the last hour. 2 transported to local hospitals. 1 refused treatment. We know at least 2 of those officers were injured as a result of bricks being thrown. There are now unconfirmed reports of windows having been broken at a Central West End restaurant. We're getting a live picture from Sky Zoo 4 right now. Over by Straub still, you can see the Lululemon store there on the left of your screen. So this is in the area of Maryland Avenue in the Central West End. Our Vinton Blandon has been on the ground just outside of this area at Waterman Place and Lake Avenue. Vinny, if you can hear us, chime in here.
I am not over at that location, but I remain in the Central West End community near where Mayor Lyda Christie lives. Now, we are closer once again, and I want to show you here. We still have the law enforcement officers. There are more officers here now than there were a short time ago. But as we heard from a commander of the North area, he says that the law enforcement officers are standing in a line, keeping people in the neighborhood who are supposed to be in it and keeping people out who are not supposed to be here. Now, the visual thing here is we understand they are protecting the mayor's house, but we see them standing here, many in their position for the ready position. Then we see some sitting on the curb. I'm not sure if Kimmy can see it, but we have some homeowners. They're standing on the sidewalks watching this. So it appears nothing is happening. There's a light on at the porch of her home, the mayor's home, but there's nothing actively happening at the home. I'm not sure where the mayor is. I tried to get some information. I can't get that. As soon as I get down here, I'm going to approach carefully some of the officers to kind of ask who's in charge and maybe can tell me something, but I'm not sure who that is. Now, these law enforcement officers are not from the city of St. Louis, but they are out here helping, and we're going to be here trying to get more information and bring it to you as soon as we can. I'll do that. Back to you.
Okay, Vinny, thank you. I'm now seeing confirmation that there have, in fact, been windows broken there.
You're seeing it there live.
Yeah, this is a business of some kind. We're told it's a restaurant in the Central West End. We don't know exactly the name of that business, but it is in the Central West End. Some window damage there. This is actually damage to the public library. And, earlier today, St. Louis Public Libraries closed all of their locations, all 16 locations to close in anticipation of these verdicts. This is at Euclid and Lindell. The verdict, singular. Clearly, windows have been broken. It's unclear if protesters have made their way inside of the library there, and clearly there is some damage.
It doesn't look like there is any
through.
activity inside. Looks like broken windows at this point. But again, the Central West End seeing increased damage now. We have reports of 3 officers injured, 2 needing transport to the hospital, broken windows at the business here in the Central West End. And we have seen, as of 5 or 6, 7 minutes ago, a continuing line of confrontation with police advancing against protesters.
Right,
and there's more
we have-
damage here at the public library. There's a major window broken out, and somebody actually did go inside and do more damage inside the public library as well.
Yeah.
We're getting first look at this video. It's important to note we're getting the first look at the video as you are at home, and we're trying to make sense of what we're seeing at the time. There's some graffiti in the windows there. So vandalism done at the public library and at a restaurant in the Central West End.
Yeah, we're going to check in with our Eric Cox as soon as we can get in touch with him. He's been following the protests as they started at Mayor Crusen's home in the Central West End and clearly have turned to vandalism at the St. Louis Public Library there. Hard to see pictures like this, but this is what's happening right now.
It is 11:18 at night. We've been on the air for an hour and almost hour, 20 minutes here. We have obviously blown out the back end of News 410. You're taking a live look at Skies in 4 there over the Central West End, the scene there. The escalation of hostility started about 9:30, 9:45. Saw the ebb and flow between police and protesters for about 30, 45 minutes. We saw tear gas deployed, smoke bombs deployed. We saw Eric Cox running with protesters for blocks on end, getting away, getting ahead of the tear gas. And to this point, we have heard of 3 police officer injuries tonight. 2 of them we know confirmed struck by bricks, and 2 of them taken to the hospital, 1 reportedly with serious injuries.
And there looks to be a crowd outside the Coffee Cartel. This is actually where this protest started up. Must have been within the 6 o'clock hour.
Because we were about 6:30, no, about 7 o'clock, maybe about 7
towards
o'clock.
the end of our 6 o'clock hour. So almost at 7 o'clock, it had been broadcast out there that there would be some kind of a protest starting at 7. Clearly that happened. Protesters began to gather outside the Coffee Cartel about 5 minutes before 7, and they made their way advancing towards Forest Park. We saw them congregate on Kings Highway outside BJC Hospital. At one point, we saw them gather again outside Mayor Crusen's home, where those bricks were thrown at police officers. We're now hearing 3 officers in total have been hurt in some way. Only 2 of them, though, transported to hospitals.
Let's go back to Eric Cox in Central West End. And Eric, I understand, yeah, you are at the public library, which has been damaged. Describe to us the extent of the damage you see there.
Steve, there are several windows and doors busted out right now, as well as graffiti written on some of the windows, SMS. And this isn't the first time we've seen this. We actually saw this on a couple of cars on Waterman here in the Central West End. Glass completely strewn about in the street out here. The window completely open. We're feeling the air from inside the library. Several books knocked down as well, completely exposed. Anybody could walk in there right now. There is another window knocked out just up the way here, if you follow me. About 100 feet from that last one, this window was also busted, but it looks like it's a double window. So this is not a way to get inside, but still plenty of glass, a large mess out here, a bit of a hazard. I can actually still feel some of the glass crunching on my feet as I walk away. Let me show you the final bit that's happened here in the library for what we know. The front entrance, the two glass doors, both of them completely shattered. Take a look at that. As a matter of fact, some of the shards are still falling off as I'm speaking to you right now. This whole thing could come down at any minute. So we're actually going to back up ourselves. But this is just an extent of what has been happening out here. Some of this unpeaceful unrest that has been occurring in the Central West End. We saw the protesters continue to head down Euclid, heading towards ITAP and the hospital. We chose to stay a safe distance away from them because they started to threaten us. My cameraman, of course, having a light on me. Not a big fan of that, of course, with them doing some of these things that would be considered criminal acts. They don't want us to be documenting it. With that said, I'm going to send it back to you in the studio. We'll continue to follow this developing story.
Eric, how far away from you are you right now from the last line of confrontation, so to speak, between protesters and police?
That is a great question. There are things, it feels like happening all around us. 360 degrees. I feel like for a moment I'm hearing about something down that way.
We've lost Eric Cox's audio at this point. This is one of our crews at Euclid and Maryland, and you see a very large police presence backing up protesters, and in between the protesters, traffic moving through the Central West End. This is Euclid and Maryland.
It looks like police are advancing their line there, trying to get protesters away from the business district there in the Central West End. An advancing situation. I saw in the last several seconds objects and bottles thrown at police there. So there are protesters, though we can't see them really in this picture. We're looking on to the police line there.
We're taking live pictures, looking at it at the same time you are. We've lost some audio. That might be because we can't trust the audio that we're getting in live from the Central West End. We're hearing it as you are, so we want to be judicious with it. We can't edit and we can't censor what we may be hearing. And of course, obviously, there is no way to tell what's being said at this point in the Central West End. But that is a heavy police presence gathered at the corner of Euclid and Maryland. Police pushing protesters back. Right now, it appears, and I'm sure this was a priority, they wanted to stop traffic flowing through that intersection, and it looks like they have. I'm sure the police have stopped traffic down the street and have told cars not to advance until this area can be secured, because right now it is not safe for police or protesters to be weaving in and out with this confrontation line in the middle of traffic.
It's something we addressed. We knew that there could be possible protests in the wake of this verdict being released. And so, it's a really valid question. What do you do if you're driving, you're trying to get somewhere, you're trying to get home, or just get away from this kind of a scene? You're in your car. The best advice we've gotten from legal experts on this, just turn around and go the other way. Get away from that situation as best as possible. But not too many options for drivers who encounter a scene like this, who are just trying to get through.
And of course, if you were watching what was going on throughout the afternoon, everything was centered downtown. So maybe you had plans in the Central West End, you went out for dinner, you lived down there. I don't know what the situation may be, but you could have been down there and then the protests spring up. And then what do you do? How do you get out of here to get home? But the best advice you mentioned is play it safe.
You're never allowed to hit people.
No.
You're never allowed to hit people with your car, even if they're not supposed to be there. That's the legal advice that we've gotten from experts in the last several days here. So, if you encounter a situation like that, the best thing to do is just get in your car, turn back around and go the other way.
But we've seen now, starting at 6:30 or 7 o'clock tonight, we've seen the protests kind of come full circle in the Central West End. We saw it in the business district. We saw it advance to the residential areas in the Central West End, and we saw some of the vandalism focused at Mayor Letta Kristen's house. We saw the police line advancing through the neighborhoods of the Central West End, and now we see a line of confrontation here at Euclid and Maryland.
Police truck there.
Yeah.
So
they're getting the city of St. Louis is getting plenty of police help from the
Plenty of
county and other municipalities, and
the
other-
National Guard if need be.
if need be.
Again, they were stationed at a firehouse in Midtown.
Well, they're doing two things. Some are ready to be deployed, and others are being deployed as a safety measure to protect firehouses and to protect property.
The governor called it critical infrastructure. He wants the National Guard to form a perimeter around any critical infrastructure around the city. I know the governor was also very vocal on securing interstates. He did not want interstates shut down. Around the 8 o'clock hour, protesters in mass were traveling down Kings Highway. They were traveling across the interstate in a southward direction. And at that point, there was a heavy police presence. They met there on Interstate 6440, the on-ramps at Kings Highway, and they were turned back around. That could be why we're seeing the protests now come full circle back into the area of Euclid and Maryland, right by the Coffee Cartel, which is right where they gathered just before 7 o'clock tonight. So now we're seeing another sort of standoff situation, which is what happened there at Clark and Tucker several hours ago. We're going into 11:30 p.m. now. Just about 6 o'clock, we saw that situation dissipate at Clark and Tucker downtown, and protesters begin to make their way to the Central West End. So this is what happens. You see a line of police. They hold that line. Protesters do one of a number of things. You may see some action. We've seen tear gas deployed tonight. Firecrackers have been used. Police are clearly ready for whatever is coming their way. So right now they're playing the waiting game.
Well, they've had, unlike Ferguson, they have had weeks to come up with a game plan. And, we in St. Louis, we had not seen anything like Ferguson before. And Ferguson sprung up in the days after Mike Brown's shooting. They have had law enforcement, the governor, they have had the mayor, the county executive, I'm sure, is in on it, on the planning. They have had weeks to prepare for possible protests, agitation, possible violence that could occur tonight, the day of the verdict being announced, and the ensuing nights. And St. Louis City Police Twitter page is acknowledging the damage in the Central West End. As of a few minutes ago, agitators have destroyed property of at least one business in the Central West End at St. Louis Public Library. So we saw those pictures if you were with us about 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes ago. Eric Cox giving you a sense of how much damage was done at the public library and also at the verdict, right? Mm-hmm. The verdict.
There's also been more information from police saying that there is a clear order to leave this area. They are telling people you must leave the area of Maryland and Euclid, which is the intersection we're looking at right now. They're also now saying what we suspected, what you guessed right, Steve, is that they're securing that area to block traffic. Mm-hmm. Eastbound Maryland and Euclid is being closed to vehicle traffic. Please be alert and use alternate routes. That's their direction to drivers. But to protesters, the direction is to leave the area altogether.
And we're looking at the parked cars here along. I believe this is Euclid. If I have my bearings correct, this is Euclid. Down the street is Maryland. That's the intersection we were looking at just a moment ago. But you see those cars parked. I'm sure there are some people that nervously would like to get their cars out of there. It's best at this point. They're probably not listening to this. But if you ever find yourself, if you're at home, you ever find yourself in a situation, Courtney had great advice. You've talked to security and law enforcement people about this. It's property. You can replace it. Do not risk yourself. Do not risk bodily damage to anybody else, including protesters, because you may be liable and you may be responsible.
You can be replaced. Your car can be replaced. You cannot.
Easy to say for us sitting here in the studio safely at Channel 4, and I understand the frustration if you've got a car sitting there, you think it's in harm's way. But again, discretion is the better part of valor in this case.
We have a stake in this. We have our crews on the ground.
Yes.
We are being told that police have given us a directive that includes us, the media, that we must get out of this area. They clearly want to just clear it of people. It can be hard to distinguish protesters peaceful protesters, violent protesters, and media. So they want to clear the area. That's the direction that we're getting right now. So that could be why we have now pulled up to the sky, to the shot from Sky Zoom 4.
If I may add this is an email from my friend and former colleague, a mentor of mine here at Channel 4, Julius Hunter, who is a TV legend and icon in St. Louis. And he emails me tonight that he could hear flashbangs and drums from his house. And he notes that Mayor Krewson lives close to him. So one of my mentors in this business, and one of my, proud to say, one of my colleagues here at Channel 4 for 8 or 10 years, and a friend of mine, Julius Hunter, telling me that he could hear and knows exactly what's going on in the Central West End. So this has been spread out. We mentioned it started in the business section, moved to the residential section. Now it seems to be back located at least part of this, maybe the majority of it, at the corner of Euclid and Maryland, that area. And so many businesses, so many restaurants, so many businesses, so many nightclubs in that area. And I'm sure police want to keep the peace and minimize the damage at this point.
We want to go now to our Vinton Blandon, who has been on the perimeter of this area. Vinny, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? Give us an update.
I know I use the word foot traffic a lot tonight, but that's exactly what's going on. In my last report, I told you things were quiet. You couldn't hear anything except cars running, doors closing, things like that. But you can see the law enforcement. They are still standing here. They are not necessarily, if you're a military person, you know the position is at the ready. They are not necessarily at the ready, but they are alert. They are vigilant. You see behind them, they have some law enforcement. They are sitting on the curb. But one interesting thing that I noted was the commander from the St. Louis Police Department, he was at the other end, and he talked about no one coming in, no one going out, and all of the protesters were gone. Well, we just saw a few, and I think you just saw a couple of them there. The protesters say they were stuck on that side farther down, and they couldn't move either way to get out. So they are just now being released, and we see a few of the stragglers walking through the area. But again, another interesting thing to note, over here where the investigation is from where someone attacked the house owned by the mayor, nothing is happening there. Just the law enforcement is outside. The lights are still on. We heard the shattered glass. We heard it breaking. We heard sound like firecrackers, things like that. But nothing's going on. There is nothing happening at the windows to board them up. So we did hear one officer say this is now a crime. This was a protest, but this is not a crime. He was not talking to us. He was talking to someone else. But maybe this is a crime scene. But again, we don't see the yellow tape. We do see the sport utility vehicle from the police department. It's parked blocking the street. So again, we don't really know. I haven't seen any sighting of Mayor Krewson, so I'm not sure what's really going on. They're not talking to us, so we're just kind of waiting, getting it as we can get it. Reporting live, back to you guys.
Benton, thank you. Great job tonight setting the scene in the Central West End. This is a new video that we have just turned around from the Central West End of the public library being vandalized earlier tonight within the hour, as we understand it. In the meantime, St. Louis police tweeting out recently that officers in personal protection gear are ordering agitators to leave Maryland Euclid area. Items being thrown at officers, avoid the area.
And here's another update from police on that changing situation. Agitators being warned this is no longer a lawful assembly. If they do not disperse, they will be subject to arrest. We have seen a couple of arrests happen live on our air, as this is a pretty organic situation. It just keeps changing by the minute here.
Some interested onlookers taking a look at the damage as they walk by and see inside the public library with the windows broken. We're gonna sign off. In a few minutes. We want to give you another live look here at the Central West End. What's going on as police are trying to get protesters off the streets and end the protest tonight. The Jason Stockley verdict was made public shortly before 9 this morning. Not guilty of first-degree murder. He will not be tried again, according to Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner. He will not go to trial again. Protests began immediately in the downtown area and lasted through 5, 6 o'clock tonight. We saw, according to interim police chief, 4 officers injured this afternoon, only one needing medical attention, 13 arrests. Of course, tonight there will be more arrests with what we've seen in the Central West End. Yeah, things have escalated. I say things have escalated. Hostilities have escalated. Police have felt the need to deploy smoke bombs and tear gas. In the last hour and a half, things started to escalate in the Central West End. About 9:30, 9:45 tonight, We are with you at 11:34 at the moment. We're going to sign off in a few minutes, but we want to make sure that you have the full understanding, the overview of what's taken place today since the Jason Stockley verdict was made public by by Judge Timothy Wilson.
Something that is important to note here, we don't want to get lost in the coverage of the reaction to the verdict, is the family behind the man in question, the man who was killed at the end of that officer-involved shooting at the hands of Officer Jason Stockley. We've spoken with his fiance, the mother of his child. We've spoken with the mother of Anthony Lamar Smith. They have called for peace. In the wake of this verdict, they said no matter the verdict, guilty or innocent, we would like for people to express how they're feeling, but to do it peacefully. That is a call that was made also by the mayor, the governor, the chief of police, really all the players here, even those who have expressed disappointment with the outcome of this murder trial. They have called for peace. Not everybody is heeding that call, but clearly a lot of people upset over the finding of not guilty in a murder trial against former St. Louis police officer Jason Stockley.
Anthony Lamar Smith's fiance, in fact, appearing at a press conference today with the governor, calling for peace, asking for peace. And typically what happens in these situations is you have many of the people out there interested in peaceful protests and not interested in destruction. But it takes a few and it ends up escalating. And tonight we have seen it escalate. Right now, it seems to be a lull in the activity, and there seems to be some sense of calm, at least for the moment, in the Central West End as police continue to order protesters to disperse and go home for the night and call it a day.
Not quite sure that's going to happen. We will continue to see how things progress throughout the night. But again, the Central West End seems to be the place where most of the action is happening. We've seen it downtown. We've seen it surrounding this area, but now it seems to be mainly the business district there in the Central West End. So in about 40 seconds, we'll go off the air, but we want to remind you that we are continuing to cover this story from all angles. We have several crews on the ground. We have our Vinton Blandon, our Eric Cox, Lauren Post, showing you pictures from Skies and Four. Steve, this is obviously a situation that is getting a lot more violent.
Well, it's more intense. It's more intense for sure. It does look like the crowd has dissipated. Those who are there, though, seem to be bent on agitating. And I want to read a couple of tweets from St. Louis Police Department within the last few minutes. Destruction of public and private property continues in the Central West End neighborhood. We are doing everything we can to keep you safe. Tear gas. This is again from the St. Louis Police Department's Twitter page. Tear gas was deployed because agitators became violent toward officers and destroyed property at Kings Highway and Waterman. Officers have given 2 commands that this is an unlawful assembly, order to disperse.
And that's something we typically do see. There's usually 2 smoke bombs that go first, and we saw some of the gray or white smoke there in Eric Cox's live shot a few minutes ago. And then, our Vinton Blandon reported several blocks away feeling the brunt of that tear gas. As Eric explained, people are throwing bricks. You saw someone just there on the left throwing large bricks. That's what I saw.
The police line is advancing here. And we see Eric and photographer in retreat here, as they should be. And we see the protesters moving back as police now form a line even more forward than they were. And moments ago, we were focused at Westminster and Union. This is a little ways down the road. But we continue to see protesters in defiance of police orders. There is obviously right now quite a bit of space and distance between the police line and the line of protesters.
It's something Chief O'Toole did talk about earlier. He said there was the potential that protests could take a turn as night falls. And here you're seeing right here about 10:35 tonight that these protests are gaining a little bit of steam here. We're going to keep checking in with our crews. We have Eric there running, and we're seeing another couple of smoke bombs going off here on the left. Vinny, as we look at these pictures, can you give us an update on your location?
Yeah, I'm right here at Waterman Boulevard and Union Avenue. So let me give you a perspective where we were just in that last report. So if you could please step away from us, please. as we were over here on Waterman Boulevard about Union Avenue. That was actually 1 block from the mayor's house. A person who lives on the street came back out. Now, about 30 seconds ago, we saw a lot of police officers in their SWAT gear. They were in unmarked cars, 4-door cars, trucks, SUVs, and they came out with their siren and lights running. I'm not sure if they were going to another emergency call or if they were just getting out of Dodge. But as you can see, I see a lot of foot traffic here from the protesters. A lot of them are running. But one thing I have noticed, the tear gas is no longer affecting our eyes where it had started affecting our eyes before. I can breathe a little bit better. People are now walking out without that. I can try to find out. Would you mind telling us what's going on down there? Because we keep it clean though. Just kind of tell us what is going on down there.
Well, we were down over there. They're over there in riot gear. And from what it looks like, they started throwing smoke bombs at us, trying to get us to disperse, following tear gas.
And I know we had talked all day about this being a peaceful protest. The only thing, they were disrupting things. I was watching my clock when we heard the 3 shatters at the home that you guys believe the mayor lives. That was 9:47. Why did things go south at that point?
Honestly, I can't comment on that because at this point, it's alleged. I don't know anything about it. I wasn't present to watch it.
So it's alleged, but you see the house got a little smoke.
I did not personally see the house, no.
Okay, so down there, what's happening down there right now?
Right now, it looks like they dispersed. I'm not really sure what is going on there. It looks like all of the protesters have dispersed.
Okay, and the people here obviously say, okay, when will it end? When do you guys plan to stop?
When we get justice.
I mean, is that going to be like tomorrow morning? Is that going to go nonstop until tomorrow morning? Or is that
as long as it takes? I mean, the fact of the matter is that a great injustice has been done. And time again, we've called for justice. We've called for peace. We've called for, reform. And every time we have been, we've been disregarded, Then we're just making noise, causing a ruckus, disrupting people. But it's our lives.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, sir. So as you just heard, that's a protest. And we've been watching him probably since about 6:45 this afternoon. So that's the reason I stopped. He's been pretty active. He's been pretty vocal. But as you just heard, we've not been down there since the tear gas. But he has said that the crowd is dispersing. There's no real end to this. They're going to go until they get justice. Now, what that means, we don't know. Back to you guys.
Confrontation. Eric, when last we saw you and a photographer, you were retreating hastily and smartly. I understand you found a safe location to update us.
Absolutely, Steve. It has been absolutely. I don't have words right now. I'll be honest with you. I just saw a police officer get pelted with a brick. He fell to the ground out here, just a block from where we are. You can still see the fog in the air from the tear gas they just deployed out here to try to get these crowds to back up, disperse. They also utilized pepper spray. I saw several officers spraying that out here. Luckily, all of us, our crew, we are okay at this time. It appears that some of these other protesters, I don't see any serious injuries, nobody wallowing. It doesn't look like anybody really got hit with the pepper spray. But this scene is still very much active. These protesters haven't dispersed as of yet, and the police are still behind that shroud of smoke back there. I know for a fact they are because we've seen more activity from them back there. Again, bricks were being thrown their way. Arrests were made before that. This has really come to a head out here. I can't stress that enough. And so it's still just a very tense situation out here. We're going to stay out here and see what develops, what unfolds, and just how long this lasts. But again, just right now out here, we're going to do our best to stay safe.
Eric, give us a sense of how many protesters are there still facing off against police. What's the number?
Steve, that's very hard to say. They're being asked to disperse, and some of them are doing so. So they're breaking off by the seconds. I mean, what you can see right now on the camera, dozens in front of you, dozens right now. But then there's others on the next block and the block that way. They've kind of started to spread out. And the officers have grown in number as well. We saw them bring in more officers. You can see their flashlights heading towards us. So in order to quantify, to give you a sheer number, that's difficult. But I can tell you that there's over 100 on each side at this time. Still dozens of people out here, both protesters and police officers. That is what we're looking at right now.
Eric, you mentioned you saw a police officer hit with a brick and he fell to the ground. Did you see any kind of police response or reaction?
Yeah, that's when the pepper spray came out. That is when the tear gas started to be deployed at a more rapid rate. I mean, they really, you could tell that pushed buttons. They were irate after that because it was one of their own, is what I'm imagining. Once one of them fell, once a brick actually hit a target, we started running. We had to start running because we knew the response was going to be significant, and that it was.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Eric. We do have some video we want to show you from earlier. First starting out with the protesters outside Mayor Cruzen's house. Also there on both sides of the street, we understand is a Jewish synagogue and on the other side a church that we don't understand the details of the arrangement, but they have allowed protesters or protesters have allowed themselves to be inside those buildings there on either side of the road. You see a lot of police officers, as Eric described. He described maybe about 100 of them. From where we're seeing, they just keep coming and coming in a long line, wearing riot gear and having shields there in front of them.
Benton Blandon said the escalation of hostilities began about, he said, 9:47 tonight. And they centered around Mayor Lyda Cruzen's house. At that point, police tried to get protesters to disperse. Some of them then did retreat and ran toward the church, the congregations. Again, this was shortly before 10 o'clock, and since then we've seen tear gas deployed on a couple of occasions. Eric Cox has said he has seen a brick strike an officer and knock him to the ground. Heavy police presence in the Central West End, and as Eric said, some of the protesters have pulled back. They moved to other blocks, so it's hard to tell how many protesters are still left in the Central West End at this point.
St. Louis police are tweeting about this. They did mention what Eric alluded to, an officer hit with a brick. Here's their tweet. Agitators are throwing bricks at officers at Kings Highway and Waterman. At least one officer right now is injured. They go on to say destruction of public and private property continues in the Central West End, doing everything we can to keep you safe. As officers, you see, are their information, trying to keep some sense of order, a sense of calm. That's not entirely happening right now.
Speaking of orderly and calm, I thought Lawrence O'Toole, the interim chief, was very calm and collected this afternoon, but he was also very realistic. He said it's an obvious fear for us that this situation will escalate. Tensions will rise after dark. Yeah. That's happened so far. You want to head back to the Central West End and check in with Benton Blandon. Benton, what's the latest from your standpoint?
Well, it appears now, Steve and Courtney, that all protesters in this area are no longer in this area. I just asked where they're going. They said, we don't know, but they are away from this area. But I can tell you, if you can see down there, that's, if I can go from memory, I believe that's going to be Lake Avenue, because right now we're at Union Avenue, Waterman Boulevard. I believe it's down there. The law enforcement is still gathered. There's a water fountain down there. The law enforcement is down there. They told us to not come down in that area. But again, I can tell you, all of the protesters have come out this way, and they say, hey, they're moving on, continue their cause. We don't know what that is, but people are now starting to go back in. We heard a couple of officers asking, hey, do you live here? And if Kenyon can see, there seems to be an officer in that white shirt right there where the cars are. It appears from that vantage point that they are talking to each person in the car. It's likely that they're checking IDs to make sure that the folks who are coming through this area indeed live down through here. But again, Mayor Lyda Cruzen's home is one block over and kind of to the left a little bit. And as I'm not sure if you can see, but we can hear it. The helicopters are over there. I see a couple more. This is actually a media crew coming through. So basically, that's the gist of what's going on. No protesters are in this area anymore. The law enforcement appear to have staged the perimeter, and they appear to be checking IDs. Right now, we have 4 cars there waiting to get through in this area. So that's the latest, guys. Back to you.
All right, Eric Cox is standing by, also in the Central West End. And Eric, we understand there's a little bit of a lull in the hostilities and at least calm for the moment.
Yeah, you could say that. For the past 10, 15 minutes or so, we haven't seen much action from either side, protesters or police. We're actually walking with a set of the protesters right now. I'd say there's still about 5-6 dozen protesters on this portion of Waterman where I can visibly see them. Officers are still just right beyond this way. You can see their police lights. You can see several of their vehicles over yonder by where that Jewish synagogue and church sat, where protesters rested inside. They kept themselves trying to stay, I guess, essentially safe from the police. And what they're telling me, they're fearful for arrest, fearful for tear gas, fearful for pepper spray. But of course, police responding to reports of unpeaceful unrest, and that's why they're out here. So these two sides meeting, an unhappy ending so far, but of course it's not over. As I mentioned, one officer pelted with a brick fell to the ground, a grown man. That is what we saw with our own eyes out here. We really aren't certain. We saw a few arrests as well. We don't know if there have been more since then. As you mentioned, it's a bit of a lull right now, but yet and still, people are on the streets out here.
Yeah.
In a community that's often quiet, but you know, I'm going to stay out here. I'm going to try and see if this will start to calm down anymore, and we'll eventually be heading home.
Okay.
Live in Central West End, Eric Cox, News 4.
Okay, thank you, Eric. We will check back with you. For right now, an update from St. Louis Police on the situation down there with a cop being hit with a brick. Here is what they're saying. An officer is being transported to a hospital for a serious injury sustained from a brick thrown at him at Kings Highway and Waterman. That situation obviously continuing with our Eric Cox there on the scene. We're working to get some video for you, more video from the scene showing some of the action that happened leading up to this. But again, that's a serious injury for an officer is probably not something they'll take lightly as they formulate their response in the coming hours and minutes. This is obviously something that police are trying to keep under control right now. If we want to go to that video that we're working on.
Well, we had it up for a moment. It was video of the mayor's house on, we were told, Westminster being vandalized. You see the vandalization there. We were told, it's not been confirmed, that a window or two were broken. Don't have confirmation of that. But this reportedly took place about 9:30, between 9:30 and 9:40. Venton and his crew were there as police ushered protesters off the property. And this really was the beginning of the escalation tonight. Protests had started in Central West End about 6:30, 7 o'clock. At one point, they attempted to shut down Interstate 64. Police blocked them. They ended up heading back toward the Central West End. And at this point, right now, there's a lull, but not before a confrontation, which has resulted in an officer injury. And he is...
Okay, y'all. I won't be here too much longer. But one thing I do want to say is, at this point, everybody should realize they never had any intention on giving us justice, ever. Since we've been here, we haven't seen it. We're not going to see it. And, you know, if people can't see that we need to separate, then it is just inevitable that those of us that want to separate, we just have to do it. We can't wait on some of these Christians and other people out here to wake up. If they can't wake up now, they just won't. Plain and simple. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this. I just wanted to get everybody caught up on what was happening out in St. Louis because, you know, like I said before, everybody was not even aware of this particular shooting that has happened in St. Louis back in 2011. And some of you may also realize the Freddie Gray case was acquitted also in Maryland just a few days ago. I did a video on that. So it is very obvious from the beginning all the way up until now, you're not going to get civil rights from an animal. It's just not going to happen. And, you know, our protests got to be deeper than just the streets. Yes, Philando Castile, it's been countless, CK, countless. Our protests got to go beyond the streets. We have to protest the entire legal system, the courts, everything, not go in their courts, because we know we're not going to get any justice there. There's no justice in their court system. We got to protest the whole thing. And that's where our people are dropping the ball. You know, going out in the streets and protesting for a few days is never going to be powerful enough. You have to refuse and protest their entire legal system, you know, and start protesting these courtrooms as well. We have a legitimate reason for not following in honoring any of their laws, because we have centuries of proof that they have no intention of ever being fair when it comes down to us. And as I stated before, we got to stop believing that white people are a jury of our peers. They are not, nor have they ever been a jury of peers for Black people. They have not lived in this world like we have. They've had white privilege. So the fact that they've had white privilege alone tells you they are not our peers. So everything got to be right. Screw their laws. We got to protest the whole thing. The laws, the courts, any rulings against us, we have to go into protest about all of it, and stop shopping in those towns that have police forces that are doing these type of things to us, killing us, and the cop get off. Don't spend your money there. If anybody in here is in St. Louis, try to shop outside of the town if that's possible. I know it's not always possible for everybody, but yes, definitely above everything, buy Black. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Buy Black and protest. We got to protest the entire system. Everything has to be under protest. You know, nothing is going to change. And integration only gave them an opportunity to spy on us around the clock. That's all that did. They were allowed to get close enough to us to keep tabs on everything that we do. That's all integration was. It was no advantage in it for us. Yeah, thank you. So the bottom line is we need to just cut these people off every chance we get. Don't let them come and have a voice around Black people anymore, because it's of no use to us. If they were going to be helpful to Black people, they had centuries to show it, and they have failed on all levels. So there is no point. I don't care. I don't want to hear nothing about no kumbaya and olive branches. The olive branch is broke at this point in time. It can't be repaired. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. And I know it's difficult at this time, but try to enjoy the rest of your day. If there's any developments tonight, I may come back on. If the protesters go out tonight and I'm able to get on to a live stream later on, I will come back on tonight. Shalom, family.